What's up, peeps? This is the Wigman, aka the Wagician, aka Floppy Ears, aka Notorious WIG. And today, I want to talk to you about being a disappointment to yourself and how to get back on the horse. So, for me, with bipolar disorder, there are so many moments in the past 6 years where I made horrible mistakes, horrible decisions, and the lows were very, very, very low. And my only predictable response to get me out of that hole was to focus on taking good care of my health and wellness and mental state. So over the last 6 years, I've developed a pretty strong discipline around things like meditation, which I call sitting in silence, because if you can strip away the label of the spiritual connotation people have with that term, at the end of the day, what meditation is allowing your mind to settle. So when I've made very poor decisions, the consequences were mostly internal. The dramatic self-hatred, self-loathing, difficulty in regaining a sense of self-worth. And what I realized as I sat for longer periods of time, to the point where I was sitting up to 2 hours a day in the mornings, was there's a limit to the amount of self-hatred and drama your mind is willing to tolerate. And beyond that point is actually peace, freedom, stillness, and bliss. And when I would sit at about an hour and 15 to hour and 30 minutes, that switch would start turning on, and I would break out of that narrative, which is why I'm such a firm believer in the practice. But if you think of your mind like a snow globe, and all day it gets shook, and meditation, sitting in silence, is simply the act of allowing the confetti of that snow to work with gravity to settle. And that's what you're doing when you meditate, is you're working with the gravity of your mind. You're working with the physics of your mind. And you're getting out of the way of a natural process of reaching stillness within yourself. And you can also think of it like stepping into a rocket ship, and meditation, sitting in silence, is not comfortable. It's as if you're moving against the gravity of your thoughts and emotions. But there is a point at which you break out of that atmospheric pressure and you're floating above it. You're hovering above the chaos. You're no longer sucked into the drama of your world. And that's a very distinct state change that you can experience. That is why I'm so addicted to the practice, because I've made so many mistakes that if I wasn't practicing meditation, I'd probably be dead, or I'd be some drug addict, alcoholic, riddled with, all kinds of shame and self-hatred that I couldn't get out of. And that web would just compound and become even harder for me to transcend and see beyond. And I think that's where most people are stuck, is once they've made a poor mistake, whether they're dealing with a mental illness or they're addicted to some substance and they act out, or they're just human and they make a mistake and they did something they knew they shouldn't have done, the refractory period shortens when you immediately mobilize all of your attention on getting back to a stable place within yourself. So meditation. Another one is journaling. So processing through all of those shameful thoughts and emotions and giving yourself permission to simply write without any judgment for what you're thinking. Because on the other side of that practice is mental freedom. And it's as if you have churned out all of the toxicity onto the page. You can also think of it like toilet paper. You wipe the mind clean of any remnants from the moment you made that mistake. And this is a process that takes time for you to rid yourself of that memory and the emotional charge tied to it. Not necessarily rid yourself of the memory, but rid yourself of the emotional charge that's tied to it. And yet, it's totally worth the investment you have to make, because on the other side, you're free. You're present. You're able to engage with people in a healthy way. You're able to hold space for others without your own shit seeping into the conversation. And that's where I think most people find themselves, is their mental hygiene is so poor that the negative emotional bacteria of their past is infiltrating and seeping into their relationships in ways they don't want, but they can't smell their own breath or their own mind. And so they don't realize that they're less and less attractive as the days go by when they don't address this aspect of their minds. Now, another practice that I've found to be extremely valuable is eating healthy. So whenever I make a poor mistake, I redouble down on getting myself into a very specific regimen around my diet, because if I'm feeling good, I can accelerate that process of moving through my own emotional turmoil. Like, if you have a clean slate, the more your slate is clean, the more you can pick up on when there's dirt, and you know where to go to address that issue. But if your mind is in a state of chaos and you don't take the time to settle it, and you don't take the time to put your body in the right state and balance, then it's harder for you to grapple with this nebulous emotional chaos. Another one that I recommend is exercise. So boosting the blood flow throughout your body has a positive effect on your brain chemistry, and it increases your ability to think clearly. And so it's important that if you are not feeling good about yourself because of a decision you made, that you will yourself into motion. You absolutely need to start moving your body, because that blood flow is going to make you feel good whether or not you like it, on the other side of the difficulty of working out. And finally, the last one that comes to mind is getting good sleep. Actually, two. Getting good sleep, because if you're well rested, again, your state, you're bringing your body and mind back into balance. And lastly, reaching out to people who love you regardless of who you've been in the past. who can affirm your self-worth, and that you are someone who deserves love. Because if they're willing to love you and they know who you are or who you've been, then they know within themselves that people are not perfect, they're not perfect, and their willingness to extend that love to you means that they want for you to be able to extend that love to them if and when they're imperfect in their own life as well. So what we have to remember about our mistakes is that if we present that vulnerability, that human frailty, that weakness to someone who loves us and they fully receive us and they support us, it's an affirmation of humanity at its core being love, and that we are all interdependent, and that what goes around comes around, and that when we extend our support, we naturally create insurance around our imperfections. So these are the things I invite you to think about the next time you make a mistake or you're in a shame spiral of self-hatred from whatever past issue that seems to continue to creep in and hijack your mind. Much love. I know you can do it. The most important one of all of these, in my opinion, is being able to sit in silence for a prolonged period of time. Because when you can hold space and not do anything, again, you're working with the physics of your mind and you're allowing that confetti to settle. And it will settle. It's lawful. It's like if you put a pot of water on the stove and you turn the heat on, after a certain period of time, eventually that water will reach a boiling point, and then you can throw a potato in there and it will cook in 10 minutes. But if you don't give the water a chance to sit over the heat long enough, it will never have the opportunity to reach that boiling point, and that potato could sit there in lukewarm water and never cook. It could sit there for 10 years. And that's where people are emotionally with their mental hygiene, is they're hoping things change, but they're not willing to sit over the fire and burn up the impurity in themselves. They're not willing to process through those emotions and give themselves permission to feel. And it builds up this emotional constipation that is very real, even though it can't be seen. So that's it. Much love.